Welcome to update number 4 for the game I've been working on part-time over the last several months. After much deliberation and head scratching, I've finally settled on a name for it. I'm calling it Turn Skull. I like the way it sounds, plus it quite succinctly describes one of the main mechanics of the game, that is the turn-based nature. This of course doesn't really make its item-based inventory gameplay that evident, but I still like the name, so Turn Skull is what I'm going with. I've also started the process of creating an actual Steam page for the game. I have all the elements in place and could make the page public, except that I don't yet have a trailer for the game. I've been putting this off because I don't really want to do it, but also because there have been a few things that I've needed to add in order to make the trailer better, at least in my opinion. One other aspect of my Steam version is that I have yet to complete all the achievements, adding them. I already have several of them written down, but I've only really implemented one of them as of this recording. I also need to test all the stuff before release. Now, Steam apparently has a beta test feature that enables a public beta test through a request invite system, so I might try that at some point, because I really need some feedback and bug reports to make me feel better about releasing this thing into the wild. As I mentioned last video, the failures that I had in converting the project from Godot 3.x to 4.x basically had me give up in conversion, and I had stated last video it was going to be a Godot 3.x game. But I decided to try yet again, and I finally figured out, even though the Godot compiler error messages I was getting were really no help, I managed to figure out that the main issue, at least initially, was a bunch of preloaded scenes that I had in an autoload script, which worked in 3.x, but 4.x it did not like. I'm not sure why, but once I remedied that, the rest of the errors and issues were fixable, and I'm now fully on 4.x. Now, even after the conversion, I've had enough issues with the engine that my initial thoughts were to release this game and then go to Unity for anything else in the future. But of course, Unity's recently poorly timed and poorly planned announcements regarding licensing has caused me to reconsider that plan. Don't get me wrong, I really like Godot, but at the same time it's frustrating with some of the bugs that crop up that make it feel less polished than an engine like Unity. Now granted, Unity has a lot more programmers and users working on the engine and providing feedback and that kind of thing. It just comes down to what you would rather deal with. Crazy per license install fees that probably won't affect most indies, or odd bugs in the engine that make you scratch your head and say, how is it that this bug is still here? So some changes since the last update. I've refactored the gameplay yet again into another componentized state machine to make them easier to reuse in other scenes. And if you remember, I did this last time. Well, I've done it again, and I feel even better about this particular one. I've also I ended up, after the conversion actually messed up all the levels, so I actually ended up going in and re-implementing them again. But what was nice is I took advantage of the new tile map and tile set capabilities of Godot 4.x. So I was able to remove a lot of the extra code that I'd written to read some of the tile map stuff and instantiate packed scenes, because the new tile map system can now instantiate packed scenes directly, so that's really pretty nice. I ended up creating replay files for all 100 levels, and a replay file is just allows me to programmatically replay the moves of the player and then verify that all the levels are winnable. So this was good because when I did this, I had to replay all the levels and make sure there were solutions, and I found several things that I had to change to make some of the levels solvable. And a lot of that was again due to me messing with more of the creature logic as well as some of the gameplay logic. But it's nice now that I have these replays because I can just run them and make sure that everything is still working. I also totally revamped the CRT shader that I was using, hopefully making it more visually appealing. I also added a few parameters to the CRT shader that now the user has the ability to play with and change as they like. I added screenshot capability, mainly because I needed to grab some screenshots for my Steam page. I've also added some unpopulated places on the current world map to indicate the possibility of more levels upcoming. Honestly, it really just depends on how many or if anybody buys Turn Skull and actually enjoys it. And lastly, I've added what I call speech bubble functionality that I can now use to make the player and other creatures talk in any of the various levels. I'm not completely sure if I'll use this, but if I do, my thoughts are to try to weave some kind of story into the levels, so you'll be able to find out bits of information about the world and whatnot, hopefully making the game a little more interesting. So there's still much to do before release, and on top of implementing achievements, I need to come up with some sort of ending. I'm not sure if that's going to be just the satisfaction of completing all the puzzles, or if I want to try to do some sort of boss level that unlocks when you complete somewhere around 90% of the levels. And if I decide to use speech bubbles to tell a story, I'll need to come up with the writing for that as well. And that's about it for this update. It was a long one, but hopefully it was interesting. I'm still hopeful to release the game, or at least open up beta testing before the end of this year, so stay tuned if you're interested in that as well. I'll post another update here when that happens, and thanks for watching.